I didn't think saying no would turn me into the villain of my entire family. But that's exactly what happened. 3 weeks ago, my cousin moved into my grandmother's house with her 3 kids, looked me straight in the eye over breakfast, and told me I should quit college 1 semester before graduation to become her full-time nanny. Not asked, told. And when I said no, she didn't just get angry. She started a war. I'm Maya. I'm 22 years old. I work part-time at a local bank. I'm finishing my accounting degree. I help pay the bills. I cook. I clean. I take care of my 74-year-old grandmother whose hands ache from arthritis, but whose heart is too soft to say no to anyone in need, or anyone who knows how to manipulate kindness. My cousin Jessica showed up with suitcases, 3 children under 8, and a story about being temporarily displaced. Within days, our quiet, predictable home turned into chaos. Crayon-covered walls, broken lamps, screaming fits, and a woman who treated responsibility like a suggestion. At first, I tried to be understanding. I told myself she was overwhelmed, that she was struggling, that family helps family. But the moment she sat beside me at the kitchen table and calmly explained that my future could wait, while hers took priority, I felt something snap inside me. She said childcare was expensive. She said college could wait. She said if I really loved her kids, I'd make the sacrifice. And when I didn't, she cried to my grandmother. She told the children I didn't care about them. She twisted the story until everyone looked at me like I was selfish, cold, and heartless. What no one saw, what no one wanted to see, was the pattern, the lies, the manipulation, the way she weaponized guilt and family loyalty to avoid taking responsibility for her own life. And by the time the truth finally came out, the damage had already been done. This is the story of how I almost lost my education, my peace, and my sense of self, because someone else refused to grow up and expected me to pay the price. And it's the story of the moment I realized that being family does not mean being a sacrifice. Before Jessica came crashing through our front door with 3 kids and a suitcase full of excuses, my life was quiet in a way that most people my age don't understand. Not easy, not carefree, just quiet, structured, routine, and held together by discipline. I'm Maya, 22. The kind of person who sets alarms 5 minutes apart because I'm terrified of being late. The kind of person who keeps a planner with color-coded deadlines. I don't do that because I'm naturally organized. I do it because if I stop, even for a second, everything in my life feels like it could collapse. I'm finishing my accounting degree at the community college nearby. 1 semester left. Just one. I can practically taste the relief when I think about walking across that stage in December and knowing I didn't quit, knowing I didn't let life swallow me. On top of school, I work as a part-time teller at a local bank. It's not glamorous, but it's stable, it's predictable. It pays well enough that I can cover my tuition, keep gas in my car, and still contribute to the house. Because yes, I live with my grandmother Ruth. And that arrangement wasn't some lazy, I don't want to grow up situation like people assume when they hear it. It was survival. Ruth is 74. She owns the house. She's proud of that. She'll tell anyone who listens that she worked her whole life for it and no one handed her anything. But she also lives off Social Security now, and it's not much. Her arthritis is bad enough that some days her fingers swell and lock, and she has to hold a mug with 2 hands like it weighs 50 pounds. So we had a routine, a real one. She'd wake up early, shuffle into the kitchen, and start her day like she always did. Tea, toast, and whatever soap opera she insisted was the only thing keeping her sane. She'd sit in her favorite chair by the window and let the TV hum in the background while sunlight warmed the blanket over her knees. And I would move around her like a second heartbeat in the house. I cooked most meals. I cleaned. I handled laundry. I took out the trash. I drove her to appointments. I refilled her prescriptions. And every month I contributed around $400 for groceries and utilities. Not because anyone forced me. Because I loved her. Because she raised me when no one else really stepped up the way they should have. And because, if I'm honest, I've always felt like I owed her for being the one stable thing in my entire family. Family. That word has always been complicated for me. When I was a kid, Jessica was the one everyone watched. She was the favorite in a way that didn't even try to hide itself. When she walked into a room, adults smiled at her first. When she asked for something, people scrambled to provide it. When she cried, the world rearranged itself. And when I needed something, I learned early not to ask. Jessica is 6 years older than me. Growing up, she got the new clothes while I got hand-me-downs. She got the compliments. I got the comparisons. She's so outgoing. She's got such a big personality. Jessica's just special. I was, what? Quiet, responsible, helpful. The kind of kid adults love because you don't create problems. I remember being maybe 10 years old, watching Jessica throw a fit at a family gathering. Because she didn't like the food, she screamed loud enough that the whole room froze. My grandmother rushed to calm her down and ended up making her a separate plate. Meanwhile, I sat there, knees pressed together under the table, chewing slowly, thinking, if I ever acted like that, I'd get punished. If I ever acted like that, they'd call me ungrateful. Jessica learned she could break rules and still be loved. I learned I had to earn love. Then Jessica dropped out of high school at 16. The family didn't treat it like a disaster. They treated it like a phase. She's just going through something. She'll figure it out. She's still young. When she got pregnant at 19 by a guy who disappeared, the family rallied like she'd won some award. They gave her money. They babysat. They excused everything. She's doing her best. Single motherhood is hard. She needs support. And I'm not saying she didn't need help. I'm not saying being a single mom is easy. I'm not cruel enough to pretend I don't see how hard that is. But the pattern was always the same. Jessica made a choice, and everyone else paid the price. And because the family always rushed in to save her, she never had to learn what consequences felt like. Then I grew up. I didn't have the luxury of phases. I went to school. I worked. I kept my head down. I built my life one practical step at a time because no one was going to show up and rescue me if I fell. Ruth was the closest thing I had to a safety net, and that's why I lived with her. Not because I wanted to hide from adulthood, because I was already living in it. Then 3 weeks ago, Jessica showed up. I still remember the sound of the car door slamming outside, the rumble of little feet on the porch, the way Ruth's face softened instantly when she opened the door and saw 3 kids clinging to Jessica like she was a lifeboat. Jessica's voice was sweet at first, soft, tired, practiced. Grandma, I just need a place for a little while. She said her landlord kicked her out for not paying rent. She said it was temporary. She said she'd get on her feet quickly. Ruth didn't even hesitate. Of course, baby, come in. And I stood in the hallway holding my backpack strap, watching it happen in real time. No discussion. No questions. No, Maya, how do you feel about this? Just an instant yes. And I told myself to breathe. Because that's what I do. I adjust. I adapt. I swallow my discomfort. I told myself we could handle it. I told myself it would be fine. But even in that first moment, watching Jessica step into the house like she owned it, watching her kids race past Ruth like a stampede, I felt a small cold warning settle in my stomach. A whisper I didn't want to listen to. This isn't going to be temporary. And she isn't here to rebuild her life. She's here to hand her life to you and call it family. The first week after Jessica moved in felt like living inside a warning I kept ignoring. At first, I told myself it was just an adjustment period. 3 kids in a house that had only known 2 adults and predictable silence for years. It was bound to be messy, loud, chaotic. But chaos, I learned quickly, wasn't the real problem. Indifference was. Every morning, I'd wake up to noise before my alarm ever had a chance. The twins would be racing down the hallway, shrieking with laughter, their feet pounding against the hardwood like it was a playground instead of my grandmother's home. The 7-year-old had a habit of turning everything into a game, jumping off furniture, slamming doors, grabbing whatever looked interesting without asking. And Jessica? Jessica stayed on the couch, phone in hand, legs tucked under her, thumbs scrolling endlessly as if the screen was more real than the children tearing the house apart around her. By the end of the first day, the living room looked like it had survived a small hurricane. Crayons ground into the walls in looping, violent lines. Toy cars scattered underfoot like landmines. A sticky smear on the coffee table that I still don't know the origin of. I looked at Jessica, waiting for her to react. She glanced up once, shrugged, and said, "Kids will be kids." That was the first crack. The second came when my grandmother's favorite lamp shattered. I heard the crash from the kitchen and felt my stomach drop before I even saw it. Ruth stood frozen near the doorway, hands clasped tight against her chest, staring at the broken glass like it was a personal betrayal. The 7-year-old stood nearby, wide-eyed and breathing fast. Jessica barely looked up. "Well," she said, rolling her eyes slightly, "that thing was old anyway." Something in Ruth's face changed then, just a flicker. Hurt. Confusion. The quiet realization that the rules she lived by weren't being respected in her own home. That night, after a full day of work and classes, I stayed up cleaning. I scrubbed crayon marks from the walls. I picked glass shards out of the rug. I wiped down surfaces while my feet ached and my head throbbed from exhaustion. Jessica didn't offer to help. She didn't even say thank you. Instead, she complained about dinner. I don't really eat leftovers, she said, pushing the plate away, and the kids need more variety. I stared at her across the table, fork hovering midair. I had bought groceries for 5 people instead of 2. My paycheck was already stretched thin, and now I was watching it disappear faster than ever. Milk, snacks, cereal, juice, frozen meals, things we never needed before were suddenly considered essential. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself family meant sacrifice. By the end of the week, I was lying to myself so often it started to feel natural. Jessica's absences became longer. She'd announce she was running errands or job hunting and disappear for hours, sometimes half a day. She left the kids behind like it was assumed someone else would deal with them. And someone always did. Ruth. I'd come home to find my grandmother slumped into her chair, eyes closed, breath shallow, while the twins bounced dangerously close to her knees. Her hands would be red and swollen. Her voice tired when she asked me, "Can you help with dinner, honey?" She never complained. That was the worst part. One afternoon, I walked in to find her asleep on the couch, while the twins jumped on the furniture like it was a trampoline. The 7-year-old stood in the kitchen, clutching a butter knife and sawing aggressively at a loaf of bread. My heart nearly stopped. I rushed in, grabbed the knife, herded the kids into the living room, and turned on cartoons just to create some form of damage control. When Jessica finally returned 2 hours later, her arms were full of shopping bags. Target. New clothes. I asked her where she'd been. "I needed some personal time," she said casually. "You don't understand how draining it is to be around kids all day." I stared at her. All day? She wasn't the one watching them. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the ceiling, the sound of cartoons bleeding through the walls long after the kids should have been asleep. A feeling settled in my chest. Heavy, uncomfortable, unavoidable. This wasn't about needing help. This was about entitlement. Then came the morning everything shifted. It was Monday. I was eating breakfast before my 8 a.m. accounting class, flipping through notes and mentally reviewing formulas. Jessica slid into the chair beside me, like she'd been rehearsing the moment. She smiled, not warmly, strategically. "I've been thinking," she said, "about our living situation." I nodded slowly, already uneasy. She leaned in, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "I think I've figured out the best solution for everyone." That word, solution, hit me wrong. She explained it calmly, confidently, like she was doing me a favor. She wanted me to quit my job, watch her kids full-time, help her finally get her life together. I laughed at first. A short, startled sound that slipped out before I could stop it. Then I saw her face. She wasn't joking. When I told her no, immediately, clearly, without hesitation, the temperature in the room dropped. Her smile vanished. Her eyes hardened. She accused me of being selfish, of not caring about family, of acting superior because I was in college. She told me school could wait, that I could always go back later, that one semester didn't matter. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Jessica didn't see my education as real. She saw it as optional, disposable, something that could be sacrificed to make her life easier. And when I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked out without another word, I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. Because I knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end of the conversation. It was the beginning of a war I never asked to fight. When I came home that evening, the house felt different. Not louder, not messier, heavier. The kind of heaviness that sits in the air when something has already gone wrong and everyone knows it, but no one has said it out loud yet. Ruth was waiting for me in the kitchen, not sitting, standing. Her hands were folded together tightly at her waist, fingers pressed into each other like she was trying to keep herself steady. Her mouth was set in a thin line, and she didn't look up right away when I walked in. That alone made my stomach drop. "Maya," she said softly, "we need to talk." Those 4 words hit harder than any shouting ever could. I set my bag down slowly, every movement deliberate, like if I moved too fast, the whole situation might shatter beyond repair. "What's wrong?" I asked, though I already knew. She sighed and finally looked at me. Her eyes were tired, not angry, not accusatory, just worn down. "Jessica's been very upset today," she said. "She's been crying since you left this morning." I closed my eyes for a second. Of course she had. "She told me you don't want to help her," Ruth continued carefully, "that you refuse to support her when she needs it most." The word refused echoed in my head like an accusation. "I didn't refuse to help," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I refused to quit my job and drop out of school." Ruth's shoulders sagged slightly, like the weight of that distinction mattered, but not enough. She's under a lot of pressure, she said. 3 kids, no stable housing, no job. I have 1 semester left, I said. My voice cracked despite my effort to keep it calm. 1. I'm not throwing away years of work. I know, Ruth said quickly. I know you've worked hard. I'm proud of you. That word, proud, kept me standing when my legs wanted to give out. But, she added, there it was. But maybe there's a compromise, she said. Family helps family, maybe just until she gets back on her feet. The air felt too tight to breathe. Because I realized something then. Jessica hadn't just asked me. She'd already started rewriting the story, and I was losing control of it. Over the next few days, the pressure didn't ease. It multiplied. Jessica stopped asking outright. Instead, she made comments. Sharp little remarks designed to land and fester. Must be nice to have your life all planned out. I wish I had the luxury of choosing myself. Some people only care about careers, not people. She said these things loudly, always when Ruth was nearby, always when the kids could hear. And then she escalated. She started leaving the children alone with Ruth. Not asking, not warning, just disappearing. One afternoon, I came home from work to find Ruth asleep on the couch, her breathing shallow and uneven. The twins were bouncing dangerously close to her knees, and the 7-year-old was trying to pry open a drawer that held knives. My heart slammed so hard I felt dizzy. I rushed in, scooping one twin up, shouting for the others to sit down. My hands shook as I turned on the TV, shoved snacks into their hands, and scanned the house for Jessica. She wasn't there. When she finally returned, 2 hours later, arms full of shopping bags, I didn't bother hiding my anger. Where were you? I demanded. She blinked at me like I'd inconvenienced her. I needed time, she said. You don't know how exhausting this is. I stared at her. You left 3 kids with a 74-year-old woman who can barely stand for long periods, I said, without asking. She rolled her eyes. Grandma didn't mind. Ruth didn't speak. She just stared at the floor. That night, Jessica cornered me again. This time, she had a piece of paper in her hand. A schedule. I've thought it through, she said, sliding it across the table. You'd watch the kids from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. That gives me time to job hunt and maybe take some online classes. I looked at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. And my job? I asked. My classes? She waved her hand dismissively. You can do online classes, maybe remote work in the evenings. I laughed again, this time without humor. No, I said, absolutely not. That's when she exploded. She shouted that I was heartless, that I didn't understand what it was like to be a single mother, that our grandmother raised us to put family first, and I was failing that test. Her voice got louder, sharper, until Ruth shuffled out of her room, drawn by the noise. Jessica turned instantly. Tears, trembling voice, broken posture. She won't help me, she sobbed. I don't know what I'm going to do. Ruth looked at me then, not angry, disappointed, and something inside me cracked open. Because I realized this wasn't just about babysitting. This was about control. Jessica wasn't asking for help. She was demanding submission. And if I didn't give it willingly, she was more than ready to burn my reputation to get it. That weekend felt endless. The house was quiet in the worst possible way, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but tense, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see who would give in first. Jessica barely spoke to me unless it was to deliver a comment sharp enough to draw blood. Must be nice not to worry about kids. I guess some people only care about themselves. Don't worry, kids. Aunt Maya's too busy for you. She said those things within earshot of the children. And it worked. The twins stopped running to me when I came home. The 7-year-old avoided eye contact, like he'd been told I was someone to be wary of. When I tried to sit beside them or ask about their day, they pulled away. That hurt more than anything else, because I did love them. They were innocent in all of this. They didn't ask to be born into chaos or raised by a mother who treated responsibility like a burden. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every conversation on a loop. Am I being selfish? Should I be doing more? Is 1 semester really worth all this damage? The guilt was relentless. And then Jessica changed tactics. Sunday evening, she asked me to sit down. Her tone was calmer, softer, controlled. I've been thinking, she said, and I'm willing to pay you. She named the number like it was generous. $200 a week. Less than half of what I made at the bank. When I pointed that out, she shrugged. You won't have to worry about gas or work clothes, she said. And honestly, spending time with kids is good preparation for when you have your own family someday. I felt my jaw tighten. This isn't about money, I said. I'm about to graduate. I've already lined up interviews. I've been accepted into the state university's accounting program. I can't walk away from that. She rolled her eyes. College is overrated, she said. Plenty of successful people never finish school. That was the moment I realized she didn't just disrespect my time. She disrespected my effort, everything I'd worked for. The next day, she announced she'd found a potential job at a retail store. $12 an hour. She looked straight at me. I can't take it without reliable childcare, she said. This is your chance to really help the family. Then she went for the kill. If I can't make this work, she added quietly, I might have to move away. Stay with my ex's mom, and then Grandma will never see the kids. Ruth overheard. Later that night, she pulled me aside. Her eyes were glassy, worried. I don't want them to move away, she said. These are my only great-grandchildren. She asked if I could help, just for a few months, just until Jessica got on her feet. I went into my room and closed the door, and I cried. Because part of me wanted to give in. Not for Jessica, for Ruth, for the kids, for the illusion that sacrificing myself would make everything easier. But another part of me, the part that had carried me this far, knew the truth. There would never be an end date. There would always be another crisis, another excuse, another demand. If I gave in now, I wouldn't just lose one semester. I'd lose my future. And the worst part? I could feel myself starting to doubt my own reality. That's when I knew something had to change. Because guilt should never feel like a weapon. That weekend felt endless. The house was quiet in the worst possible way. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but tense. Like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see who would give in first. Jessica barely spoke to me unless it was to deliver a comment sharp enough to draw blood. Must be nice not to worry about kids. I guess some people only care about themselves. Don't worry, kids. Aunt Maya's too busy for you. She said those things within earshot of the children. And it worked. The twins stopped running to me when I came home. The 7-year-old avoided eye contact, like he'd been told I was someone to be wary of. When I tried to sit beside them or ask about their day, they pulled away. That hurt more than anything else, because I did love them. They were innocent in all of this. They didn't ask to be born into chaos or raised by a mother who treated responsibility like a burden. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every conversation on a loop. Am I being selfish? Should I be doing more? Is one semester really worth all this damage? The guilt was relentless. And then Jessica changed tactics. Sunday evening, she asked me to sit down. Her tone was calmer, softer, controlled. I've been thinking, she said, and I'm willing to pay you. She named the number like it was generous. $200 a week, less than half of what I made at the bank. When I pointed that out, she shrugged. You won't have to worry about gas or work clothes, she said. And honestly, spending time with kids is good preparation for when you have your own family someday. I felt my jaw tighten. This isn't about money, I said. I'm about to graduate. I've already lined up interviews. I've been accepted into the state university's accounting program. I can't walk away from that. She rolled her eyes. College is overrated, she said. Plenty of successful people never finish school. That was the moment I realized she didn't just disrespect my time. She disrespected my effort, everything I'd worked for. The next day, she announced she'd found a potential job at a retail store. $12 an hour. She looked straight at me. I can't take it without reliable childcare, she said. This is your chance to really help the family. Then she went for the kill. If I can't make this work, she added quietly, I might have to move away. Stay with my ex's mom, and then Grandma will never see the kids. Ruth overheard. Later that night, she pulled me aside. Her eyes were glassy, worried. I don't want them to move away, she said. These are my only great-grandchildren. She asked if I could help, just for a few months. Just until Jessica got on her feet. I went into my room and closed the door. And I cried. Because part of me wanted to give in. Not for Jessica. For Ruth. For the kids. For the illusion that sacrificing myself would make everything easier. But another part of me, the part that had carried me this far, knew the truth. There would never be an end date. There would always be another crisis, another excuse, another demand. If I gave in now, I wouldn't just lose one semester. I'd lose my future. And the worst part? I could feel myself starting to doubt my own reality. That's when I knew something had to change. Because guilt should never feel like a weapon. The phone rang just after dinner. I knew it was going to be bad before Ruth even picked it up. Her posture changed instantly. Shoulders tightening, mouth pulling into a thin line. She didn't put it on speaker, but she didn't need to. The volume alone carried every sharp word straight into my chest. Aunt Linda was screaming. Not crying, not asking questions. Screaming. She accused us of throwing Jessica and the kids out onto the street. She said Ruth had chosen me over her own daughter. She said I was selfish, manipulative, and cruel, using my education as an excuse to avoid family responsibility. I stood there frozen, listening as my entire character was rewritten in real time. Ruth tried to explain, calmly, patiently. She told her the truth about the unemployment benefits, about being left alone with 3 kids for hours, about the lies. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Linda said she needed to talk to Jessica herself. When the call ended, Ruth sank into her chair, like the strength had drained straight out of her body. "I never wanted this," she whispered. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying every moment, every argument, every accusation, every look of disappointment I'd seen cross Ruth's face. I wondered if I'd pushed too hard, if I'd broken something I couldn't fix. The guilt came back stronger than ever, because even though I knew the truth, even though I knew I wasn't wrong, the weight of being blamed pressed down on me like a physical force. The next day, Linda called back. Her voice was different, quieter. She said she'd spoken to Jessica, and then, hesitantly, she said something that made my stomach turn. Jessica had been telling different versions of the story to different people. She'd been calling relatives, friends, anyone who might offer money, housing, sympathy. Each version cast her as the victim and me as the heartless obstacle standing in her way. Linda apologized, but the damage was already done. For days, I felt like I was walking through thick fog. I couldn't focus in class. Numbers blurred together. I'd sit at my desk at work, staring at the screen, my chest tight, my thoughts spiraling. What if I was wrong? What if family did come before everything? What if I'd ruined relationships I could never repair? The kids haunted me the most. I kept thinking about their faces when Jessica told them I didn't care, the way they'd pulled away from me, like I was someone dangerous. That image stayed with me. Late one night, I found Ruth sitting alone in the dark living room. "I should have protected you," she said suddenly. "I should have said something sooner." I sat beside her, tears spilling down my face before I could stop them. "I don't want to lose my future," I whispered. "But I don't want to lose my family either." Ruth reached for my hand. "You're not the one tearing this family apart," she said. "You're just the one who finally stopped letting yourself be torn down." That was the lowest point. The moment where everything felt fragile, uncertain. Like no matter what happened next, something precious had already been lost. And then, the truth started coming out. Not from me, from everyone else. The shift didn't happen all at once. It came in pieces, small, uncomfortable truths stacking on top of each other until denial became impossible. It started with a phone call. Ruth answered it while I was studying at the kitchen table. I wasn't listening at first, just half aware of her murmured responses, until I heard my aunt's voice crack through the speaker. It was Linda again. But this time she wasn't yelling. She sounded shaken. She told Ruth that Jessica's new living situation had already fallen apart. The friend she'd moved in with lasted barely 2 weeks before asking her to leave. According to Linda, Jessica had expected free childcare again, left the kids behind while she went out for hours. When the friend refused and asked Jessica to help with expenses, Jessica accused her of being unsupportive and heartless. I felt a strange, hollow relief, not satisfaction, confirmation. Then Linda kept talking. Jessica had gone to stay with another cousin, Michael, and his wife. That lasted 4 days. 4. Michael called Linda furious. He said Jessica left her kids with his wife all day while she disappeared. When confronted, she repeated the same script: job hunting, family loyalty, temporary hardship. They told her to leave. Linda paused on the phone, voice trembling. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't want to believe it, but this isn't new." And then the stories started coming out. After another. Our cousin Rachel admitted Jessica had lived with her family 2 years ago. She said Jessica pressured her teenage daughter to skip school to babysit. When Rachel refused, Jessica accused her of betraying family and left in the middle of the night. Taking jewelry. Our Uncle Tom shared his story. 6 months of excuses, no rent, no help, plenty of spending. When they asked for contributions, Jessica claimed they were trying to profit off her misfortune. The worst one came from Great Aunt Marie. 82, lives alone, mobility issues. Jessica had stayed with her for 2 months, turned her into a full-time babysitter. When Marie fell and injured her hip chasing one of the kids, Jessica didn't come home. A neighbor called the ambulance. When Linda told us that, Ruth covered her mouth with her hand. Her eyes filled with tears. That was the moment everything changed. Linda organized a family meeting. For the first time, people stopped making excuses. They compared notes, shared stories, recognized the pattern. They agreed on one thing: no more enabling, no more free housing, No more free childcare, no more emotional blackmail. When they presented this united front to Jessica, she exploded. She accused the entire family of ganging up on her, said they were punishing her for being a single mother, called the conditions discriminatory, cruel, unfair. And then she disappeared. No calls, no texts, no social media. 2 weeks of silence. Linda was frantic. Ruth barely slept. And then, just when I thought it was finally over, Jessica came back. She showed up at our house while I was at work, brought the kids, suitcases, the same story. She told Ruth I had agreed she could stay. When I got home and saw them unpacked again, my chest went tight with something close to panic. I confronted her. She denied lying, said she was desperate, said she just needed one night. Ruth looked at me, torn, and against every instinct I had, I agreed to one night. 5 days later, she was still there, already slipping back into old patterns. That morning, I checked the browser history on Ruth's computer. No job applications, dating sites, social media. She was hunting for her next place to land, her next escape. And in that moment, standing alone in the kitchen, staring at the screen, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger, clarity. Jessica wasn't confused. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was strategic. And the only way to stop it was to stop playing. Aunt Linda came over the next morning. She didn't call ahead. She didn't give Jessica time to prepare a story or adjust her mask. She arrived early, while the kids were still eating cereal and Jessica was still in her pajamas, phone in hand like nothing in the world was wrong. Linda brought her husband with her. That alone told me that this wasn't going to be another conversation Jessica could cry her way out of. They sat her down at the kitchen table. Ruth stayed standing beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. I could feel how tense she was, how much strength this was taking from her. Linda didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult Jessica. She did something far more dangerous. She laid out facts. She talked about Rachel, about Michael, about Uncle Tom, about Great Aunt Marie and the hospital. She mentioned the dating sites, the unemployment benefits, the lies about job hunting. And she ended with one sentence that made the room go silent. This isn't bad luck, Jessica. This is a pattern. Jessica tried to deny it at first. Then she cried. Then she accused. Then she begged. She said she was overwhelmed, that she was scared, that she didn't know how to fix her life, that everyone was being unfair to her. Linda listened, and then she gave her a choice. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to find another place to stay. 2 weeks where Jessica would be fully responsible for her own childcare. She was not allowed to leave the kids with Ruth for more than 2 hours at a time. She had to provide proof of job applications and interviews. If she broke those rules even once, she would be out immediately. Jessica agreed. She nodded. She cried. She promised. But I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't planning to change. She was planning to escape. Over the next week, she played the role, stayed home, talked about applications, made a show of responsibility. But I noticed the phone calls, the whispered conversations, the way she stepped outside and lowered her voice. Then one morning I heard it, her voice through the hallway wall. I just need somewhere for a couple of months, she said. I swear I'm getting back on my feet. The same script, the same promise. She had found her next place. When she announced a few days later that a friend from high school had offered to take her in, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief for us. Sadness for whoever was next. She moved out the following Monday. Surprisingly calm, almost cheerful. She hugged Ruth, thanked her, promised to keep in touch. Ruth smiled, but her eyes were tired now, wiser. After Jessica left, the house felt like it exhaled. No screaming, no tension, no constant guilt hanging in the air. Just quiet and safety. I finished my semester without interruption. 3 weeks later, I graduated. Ruth cried during this ceremony, hands shaking, eyes shining with pride. She told everyone who would listen that I did it, that I didn't give up. I was promoted to a full-time position at the bank not long after. Better pay, benefits, stability. Jessica didn't last long with her new arrangement. According to Linda, it fell apart within 3 weeks. No one was surprised. The family stopped stepping in, stopped rescuing. And for the first time, the consequences landed where they belonged. Not on me, on the person who created the chaos. 3 weeks after Jessica moved out for the last time, I stood in my graduation gown beside my grandmother and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not relief that the chaos was over, but certainty. Certainty that I hadn't ruined my life by saying no. Certainty that protecting my future wasn't selfish. Certainty that love does not require self-destruction. Ruth cried through the entire ceremony. She held my hand afterward and told me she'd never been prouder, not just because I graduated, but because I didn't abandon myself when it would have been easier to do so. That meant more to me than any diploma. I start my bachelor's program at the State University next month. I'm working full-time at the bank now, saving, planning, building something solid, something no one can take from me. Our house is quiet again. The good kind of quiet, the kind that feels safe. Jessica is still moving from place to place, according to Linda. Different houses, same story, same cycle. The family no longer rushes in to catch her when she falls. And that's the hardest truth I had to accept. You can love someone and still refuse to save them from the consequences of their choices. The children are the ones I think about most. They deserve stability. They deserve a mother who puts their needs ahead of convenience. I hope one day Jessica chooses to become that person. But I've learned something important. My responsibility is not to destroy my own future to compensate for someone else's refusal to build theirs. Family is not a blank check. Love is not obedience. And boundaries are not cruelty. They are survival. If you're watching this and you're stuck in a situation where someone is using guilt, obligation, or family loyalty to pressure you into sacrificing your goals, hear this. Saying no does not make you a bad person. It makes you honest. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself, even when the people who benefit from your sacrifice don't want you to. That chapter of my life is closed. And for the first time, I'm walking forward without looking back.